live. How's it going, all you Mets fans? It's your guy Wardy, and as you can see, we're back at it with our latest New York Metropolitan pregame segment, something that we haven't done in a hot minute, really because of how my schedule has been the past couple months, making sure we still hammer our postgame coverage and the clips I've been coming out with in the morning, which has a lot to do with the big Mets updates that we really try to rehash every single night and talk about, repost the following day. But I got a lot to get into here, and if you want to know why, you already know the answer. It's crunch time, everybody. We got to lock in the same way that this Mets team needs to lock in. And without Francisco Lindor for at least the next couple days, and we're going to expand on that here shortly, on the latest on Francisco and his health concern, the latest updates that he spoke about himself over the past hour or so at the time of being live here, we're going to do a complete deep dive on what we should expect in this series beginning tonight against the Washington Nationals. How are these lineups faring? As you guys can see from the left and right of me, how are these pitching matchups faring, and why I have a lot of optimism actually with the Mets tonight, even without Francisco Lindor going to be a part of things. That and more is what we're going to get into here in just a second, everybody. But everyone first chiming in live on a replay, greatly appreciate you all taking the time. Frank, how are you? Let's see, Ricky, Hunter, Will White, Ethan, D. Wilson, great member, BC, Anthony, great member, how are you? Anthony says, is Lindor playing today? Sadly, he is not. Yes, it is definitely unfortunate that we were without Mr. Smile for another game. And as we spoke about in our video that came out earlier today, highly implore you all to check it out in case you haven't already. I said that if Lindor is going to miss even at minimum, say just like 2 or 3 games of this series, which he is absolutely going to do, there is a concern level among us Mets fans. Will this Mets team be able to step up without the man who has been leading the charge for them, in which they have had all their highs directly in hand with Mr. Francisco Lindor, MVP caliber player himself? That is the truth. Will they be able to overcome this latest obstacle, losing him? That is what we're going to find out. I'm going to get into the pros and cons, what I like about this matchup as well, what I expect for the Mets tonight, and what should be happening with this Mets team, and answering whatever comments, questions you got for me, as this will probably run, I'd say, around a half-hour long pregame show, if not a little bit longer than that. So I appreciate you all first chiming in live on a replay. I understand that this was not something that you guys knew about all that earlier for my live viewers here on YouTube. My apologies. The pregame was something that I realized my schedule aligned with, and I want to try to be throwing out these as soon and as quick as possible every single time that we have the opportunity to do so. So tomorrow and the following games, I will be eyeing to do pregame coverage as well. Basically, as long as I am around, I plan to do pregame coverage for games for the remainder of the regular season. The goal is to cover the vast majority of them, and the goal is to still to cover every single one in our postgame coverage, as we always do. But let's see what you guys and gals got for me, because as we all saw the news together, Eric, how are you, my man? Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate that. Congratulations to your Phillies, as much as that pains me to say. We're all beyond bothered by that entire ordeal there in Philly. It's one thing for me to be in attendance for Game 2 as the Mets dropped 6-4 after being up 4-0 without Lindor in the lineup. It's another thing to lose 2-1 yesterday, as the Mets' woes on Sundays and on the weekends continue to be a major problem. And listen to these statistics, folks. I just want to throw these your way before we get into not only the lineups here, Francisco Lindor, and how you guys have a chance to get in on all your best sports betting action with our awesome friends at BetUS. As you can tell with the live lines down below for money line, spread, and you're going to get the over-under on total runs if you're going to bet for the Nationals or bet for the Mets. Make sure you bet responsibly. But what I saw here from Mark, who's a follower of mine on X, said the following: some interesting things on this Mets team. They're 20-3 on weekend games this year. Their last 9 Sundays, as I've reiterated to you all, they've been horrendous, but they've been 1-8 now over their past 9 Sunday games with just 15 total runs scored. The Mets are 44-16 on weekday games since June 1st. So what is the positive out of this? The positive is that's a good sign for the Mets to do well in this series against the Washington Nationals, just based on that math alone. A 44-16 weekday record since June 1st has to be the best record in baseball. I'd imagine it's definitely that, right? Considering the Mets have had arguably, and I want to say they're either number 1 or they're top 3 now in the best record since the end of May overall across Major League Baseball, as they are, I believe, at the 59 or 60th win plateau, a little over 30 losses over that span. Really, really good, though, on the ratio there. But crazy to see just how bad the Mets have been on weekend games, day games especially. And this is something to bear in mind because us fans are the reason as to why games are no longer nearly as much night games on the weekend. There are no more 7 o'clock, 7:10 p.m. Eastern Saturday games the way that there used to be. And while a lot of fans have seemed to enjoy that from a fan attendance, it has not equaled out to have a success level for this Mets team. So I don't know if there's a reversal or something we could do there, but that should be had because the Mets have definitely had drastic splits in weekend versus weekday games and day games versus night games, especially. It has not been good for this Mets team. But what has been good for this Mets team has been Mr. Smile himself and Francisco Lindor. And speaking of Francisco Lindor, and how you doing, BC Camp, great member. Frank going up the list. I got my man Ricky. How are you? Will White, hope you are doing fantastic. Jesus, Andres, let's go up here just a little bit more. Peen, Mike, Jay Cara, go Mets indeed, brother. Luis, many blessings right back at you, brother. I appreciate that. How optimistic am I about this homestand? That's a great question, Jesus, and that goes directly in hand with our conversation on Francisco Lindor. So let's start the topic here on Francisco Lindor. I feel like we're going to talk about him endlessly, no matter if he's playing in a game or not, because we all know how much is now falling on the shoulders of all these other key bats in this lineup now that Lindor is out for a period of time. And the latest on Francisco Lindor that he said himself today is the following, that thankfully imaging came back well. He found out that there is no serious damage. He was asked, oh, does he have a strain or anything like that? He's like, no. He's like, truthfully, he's like, as soon as they told me that there's no structural damage, I just kind of, tuned everything out. I was just happy knowing that, this is a day-to-day thing and not something that's going to be more than that. Lindor also did preface that this is something that, as we heard a day or so ago, him say himself, he's been dealing with for the past 2 weeks at least. He's dealt with ailments throughout his career. This is the first time since minor league ball that he has dealt with a back ailment at all, so that is just something to throw out there. It is foreign for Francisco Lindor. This is not a common injury that he usually sustains, but goes in hand with the bumps and bruises of being a high-level, high-caliber, MVP-caliber player at a ridiculous rate the past 3.5 months now. That's how good Lindor has been. But having said that, now that Lindor is on the shelf here, what is the latest? Well, as we know, the MRI results came back clean. So instead of it being potentially a season-ending injury for Francisco Lindor, where many of us thought it was because of that slide there, passing second base in Game 1 against the Phillies, yes, that is where he had more of an eye-opener that, like, okay, we need to be mindful of this, which led to him being departed. But he did want to emphasize that that alone wasn't what really sparked things. This was a build-up for a while now that just reached a point of uncomfortability that Lindor doesn't want to stretch too thin when he doesn't know what the results could have been prior to finding out the MRI results. But now it's a 2-3, 2-5, 2-5, or a 3-5 stretch where we will be without Francisco Lindor. Best case scenario himself, he said that he'll be back in this Metropolitan lineup before the end of the National Series. But he said, I don't know how realistic that is, and I'm going to go on a limb and say that that's not realistic at all, because even if Lindor came back clean and he wasn't having any back flare-up, any tightness and soreness, which he said himself he's actively going through, he gets the tightness, and then post-game he gets the soreness, which is normal for a guy of his caliber and the athlete that he is, but a little bit more notable, if you will, knowing that it has kind of, factored just slightly enough into his play, even though you haven't seen it all that much. It definitely is something that's kind of nagging him, and I'll have to deal with for the rest of the regular season, he said himself. But he is confident that he will be returning to the Mets, but at bare minimum, we're pretty much looking at a Francisco Lindor-less New York Metropolitan Club for this 3-game set against the Nationals. And that in itself is where I have a concern level more than anything. Because do I have optimism in this Mets team? Yes. I actually have a decent amount of optimism in this specific matchup tonight, you might be wondering, against Jake Irvin. Because Jake Irvin, who 2 starts ago against the Mets, did carve us up and went 8 shutty. Let's not forget the most recent outing there, still in the same month of July, where the Mets teed him up for batting practice with 6 earned runs. Did the same thing in a start against him, and the first time he faced the Mets out of his 3 throughout his career. So 2 out of 3 tells you the Mets have had the upper hand here against Jake Irvin. And as long as this is not a, bad, good type flow that we're going through, the Mets are destined to hit well against the guy that they have seen very well this season. And the last time they saw him and where they had their success, that's when Jesse Winker was his teammate. So there we go. Jesse's facing his former club for the first time now as a New York Metropolitan. I don't believe the Mets have played the Nationals since they've acquired Jesse post-trade deadline. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Maybe I am. These games can be a blur when you have a 162 at times. It tends to to happen. But no less, the Mets are going to definitely look to pounce here against Jake Irvin. But even with those favorable numbers, while there's optimism, there is still a level of skepticism. And Dave, great member. How are you, my man? Thank you so much for being in here. Speaking of you, Dave, I know you know a lot about this guy right here, Mr. Grimace. I did want to let you all know we did see the news today itself, and right around section 305, 306 or so at Citi Field, right by the Coke corner, one of the seats is a purple seat now, and it says Grimace on it, and it'll be that way for the rest of the regular season. So the Mets are rallying once more with Grimace. They're also giving out these Grimace-themed handouts that are presented from McDonald's for the game today, that they were giving out at least to people in PR. I don't know if they're giving it out to fans at all. Either way, the Grimace rally is trying to make its way back. So if the Mets do win tonight, I'm 1,000% putting Grimace back on the thumbnail. We're going to ride that wave for as long as we can. Because if we look at one high the Mets have had this year, there was no high greater outside of their recent performance over the past month or so, where they took care of business against the Orioles, against the Padres, against the D-backs, etc., was that great run in June where they finally turned their season around after being 11 games below 500. So all we know is, no matter how much you love or hate the purple candy corn looking mofo that is Grimace, he's back with a vengeance, and he's back to save the day. Fitting that on a day that we see Francisco Lindor out of the lineup, it's a very fitting quote, a soul for a soul, if you will. One down, another has to find himself rising. If it ain't going to be Pete Alonso, if it ain't going to be JD Martinez, if it ain't going to be Brandon Nimmo, it needs to be Grimace. So we'll see what happens during this matchup tonight. All I'm telling you is the Grimace magic is now here and is a part of Metsland once more. We hawk to it all over that thing. Now let's get back in the Grimace mode, and let's hopefully have ourselves a series victory. If you know, you know. Thank you guys for the kind words. I appreciate that. Brandon B, thank you, my man. Hope you are doing fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I want the Mets to do well. I enjoy the Phillies versus Mets rivalry, as do I. When that rivalry isn't at its peak, it sucks, because I think Philly versus New York is the best rivalry in various sports that you can find yourself, whether it's football, hockey, baseball, you name it. It's so unprecedented versus other cities, and I absolutely love every second of it. I was, as a Knicks fan, I was at Wells Fargo Center with my girlfriend, and we got to witness the Knicks take down the Sixers and kick them out of playoffs. That, if you're a Sixers fan, I apologize. I know you're not happy about that, but the point here is that we certainly enjoyed that, even being in enemy territory, because we love the back and forth, we love the rivalry, and we know that is what makes sports as great as it is. Let's see, I should put a little tiny Mets hat on that plushie. You're right. We'll try to get that. You got a subscription to talk to us, says Corn Pop in the chat. No. Juan Diaz, how's it going, brother? Great moderator member. Happy to have you in here. So as we talk a bit more about the Mets without Francisco Lindor, the skepticism comes in because you don't have Mr. Smile. So as we look at the lineups here, let's do a breakdown briefly first on the Washington Nationals, because the Nationals, there's a couple guys I'm going to tell you to all look for in this series, and you guys can either disregard that or take it, and then you'll understand that I probably have a decent shot of what I'm talking about based on not only the eye test, but what some numbers can tell you. So briefly here, Washington Nationals, Dylan Cruz, of course, top draft pick out of LSU. Big pickup there, 686 OPS, but he just started his MLB career. He's a guy that I definitely could see having at least home run this series. Big bop in his bat. And while I could see that also with a guy in James Wood, who had his first MLB hit against the Mets, because of course he did, I definitely could see some home run heroics happening from Dylan Cruz in that leadoff spot. Juan Yepez, who continues to be a very underrated hitter, not known for his defensive upside, which is why the Cardinals kind of gave up on him a little too soon. He's been thriving, though, since they parted ways with Joey Meneses and just outright him to AAA a couple months ago, that being the Nationals. You got Andres Chaparro there batting fourth in the DH spot. Jose Tena batting fifth and second base. We got Vargas, who's one of my favorite Nationals because he has terrible fundies. I'm looking at him to have a god-awful hot corner defense in this series, and hopefully that, in fact, happens. Then we also got Keibert Ruiz, who I'm surprised has been as underwhelming as he has so far in his MLB career. I know he's a switch-hitting catcher. It's not easy, but I really had high hopes for him when he was first dealt from the Dodgers to the Nationals as part of the Trey Turner and Max Scherzer trade a couple years ago. Jacob Young, they're batting eighth. He's had some nice hits against the Mets this season. We've seen him unfortunately, and Nasim Nunez handling shortstop there, batting ninth for the Nationals. Jake Irvin with a 4.19 ERA and a 4.21 expected ERA, which tells you that there is no difference between the two at all. The expected numbers are pretty much the exact same thing. So as we fast forward now to the Mets lineup and we look at where I have both optimism and skepticism, it is the following. We have Jose Iglesias batting leadoff today, but at shortstop, Jose, who's played the vast majority of the season there at second and third base, gets that rare start at the shortstop position with Lindor being out with injury. Jesse Winker facing his former club. I need to see Jesse at least hit one home run to make up for him having the game-winning home run against Mr. Adrian Hauser and the Mets on 4th of July. I needed it to become full circle. I know he's had walk-off heroics for us. I know he's had some big moments. I need to see Jesse Winker beat the absolute piss out of his former team. That is what I'm looking for more than anything in this entire series from an individual offensive player production. I hope Jesse Winker balls the hell out. That's what I want to see big time. JD Martinez there, batting third with a 750 OPS. Jose Iglesias at 805. Winker just below 800. JDM looking for a big series after having terrible luck against the Philadelphia Phillies. He was barreling baseballs left, right, and center, and if it wasn't for a home run robbery heroics that we saw from the Schmuck Stevenson in center field in Game 2, in which I was sadly there in attendance to witness, or if it was going to be what we saw in just some key lineouts of over 100 miles per hour yesterday. I love JD Martinez having a big series. He's destined to break out, and hopefully that starts tonight. It needs to really happen, and that's where the optimism and skepticism balance comes into play. Optimism is that this Mets lineup is deep. Even without Lindor, even without McNeil, I have uber amount of confidence in their ability to put the ball in play. The skepticism is that I don't have an uber amount of confidence and the key guys in this lineup to step up without Francisco Lindor. As I referenced, all the great successes the Mets have had this year has been all full-fledged with Lindor in the thick of things more often than not. Not having Lindor really scares me because now we're relying on a Pete Alonso at first base, who has been playing some strong defense there as of late. The offense, we know how up and down it is. And for Pete, a man who might be playing his final 2 weeks as a New York Met, his potential final homestand at Citi Field, as crazy as that is to say, I call upon all New York Metropolitan fans that will be in attendance for tonight's game and any games for the remainder of the regular season to cheer this man up as much as you can. One, we have to appreciate everything Alonso's done for this organization, knowing that there's uncertainty about his future. And two, also would be great to try to juice him up and pump him up so that way we can get Pete Alonso locked in and stepping up finally, before it's too late, before the end of the season, at the most vital time without Francisco Lindor in this lineup. There is zero excuses. Jake Irvin is beatable. This entire series, pitching matchup-wise, these are all guys that Pete Alonso should be able to handle. He has not been able to handle these pitching matchups consistently at all this season. He is a guy that will directly go in hand where will the Mets go in the series, because Pete Alonso needs to be the man to pick up and really back up his shortstop in Francisco Lindor, who has back ailments for the first time since his minor league days, simply because, I wonder why. It's almost like he's carried this Mets team this entire effing season since they started to get on a roll. I need Pete Alonso to be that guy. I'll be rooting for him heavily. I will be in attendance to this Friday's Mets game. Yes, guys, your boy Wardy will be there this Friday. So pumped up. I also have some really, really exciting little announcements to share with you all that I'm not going to bother with until Friday. You guys will see it when it's happening there. But big day, all day. Going to be an entire day in New York for me as I reside in PA there on Friday. We're going to end the evening there with that Mets game against the Phillies for Game 2 of the set. Friday night home game, so pumped up for it. And I'm going to be screaming my head off the way that I still have a raspy voice from screaming my head off 48 hours ago or so there at Citizens Bank Park. So Pete Alonso, it goes without saying, we need this man to step up. But now more than ever, without Francisco Lindor, who is going to be that guy to keep the Mets afloat in this wild card position? It needs to start with a man like him. Brandon Nimmo, same thing. Nimmo, who's had a horrendous second half of the season. There's no other way to put it. Brandon Nimmo has been so inconsistent in the second half this year after looking like one of the most home run heroic, power-hitting leadoff hitters imaginable since moving out of the leadoff spot for Brandon Nimmo has eventually become his demise. You can tell that the lack of comfortability, not having stability in the lineup has definitely went in hand with his swing and miss. You can't tell me otherwise. He might say, oh, it doesn't matter where you put me, but even if it doesn't matter to him, it is maybe him not realizing it's definitely impacting something, even if he is not actually noticing it right away himself. Brandon Nimmo has not looked nearly like the guy that we need him to be. And while, yes, he had that massive home run there in Game 1 against the Phillies, which I appreciate, I also had a feeling he was going to step up in one of those games in that batter's box against the Phillies, because he has had some flair for the dramatics there going over the past couple years, including 2022, where we saw some big moments. So that's how I feel about Brandon Nimmo. Need him to step up as well. That goes without saying. A 728 OPS there, batting 5th. Batting 6th is Mark Vientos. This is a big one. Marky V is batting right around 100 over his past stretch since his last home run or so. So basically, since Vientos' last heroic play for the Mets, he hasn't provided all that much on the offensive end. 858 OPS, still having a tremendous year. One of, if not the most lethal offensive weapon from a third base position this season, not named Jose Ramirez and Rafi Devers. That is what you're getting there in Marky V and Swaggy V. And this is a series where I feel like, if we look back the past couple games, he's probably been pressing a little bit, right? At least it's felt that way, especially with Lindor's ailment, knowing that Alonso's not consistently been that guy. JD Martinez had terrible luck in that Philly series. The balls just were not flying out the way the Mets were hoping that they would. You could definitely tell a young, not an experienced now player, but a young player, Mark Vientos, is definitely trying to pick up the weight of a guy in Francisco Lindor who's been now with injury. And while I appreciate that, we just need Vientos to play his game. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'll be back in literally 1 second. Apologies, folks. Just had to take an intermission. And Dave, funny you said that, my man. I literally went to the P.O. box today, and I didn't have my key. And they closed. So I will be going back. I promise. I'm so sorry. I literally had intentions today because I had to go get stamps as well. We will get that done, and I will gladly check it out. And thank you so much, as always. And speaking of it, I got the key right here. So there you go. My schmuck self thought I had it in my car earlier today, and I didn't. It is what it is. What happened to Beatty? Beatty had a thumb ailment, sadly, that had him out basically for the remainder of the minor league season, or, the good chunk, rather. And that definitely was unfortunate because Beatty was going to be a September call-up if that injury didn't happen. But Marky V there batting 6th. Tyrone Taylor batting 7th with just under 700 OPS. Nice home run heroics yesterday. Thank you for that, Tyrone. Please do it again. Never hurts. Francisco Alvarez batting 8th here with a 679 OPS. And yes, Eddie Alvarez there batting 9th at the second base position. And this is where we start to have a problem, in my humble opinion, because look, the reason why Luis Angel Acuna is not starting tonight's game is not because, the Mets just do not want him playing whatsoever. It is simply because of the pitching matchup. The Mets want Acuna to mainly face lefties. So if the Mets are going to face a Mackenzie Gore and or Patrick Corbin in the series, expect Luis Angel Acuna to be starting at the shortstop position. Do I agree with the nonsense to be already emphasizing these splits? No, I do not, because Eddie Alvarez is not a bat that I think warrants whatsoever going out of your way to do this. If there is one understanding I at least have, is that Carlos Mendoza may be viewing Eddie Alvarez in the 9-hole as an opportunity for him to really succeed against a Jake Irvin, in which the Mets have plenty this season, if you exclude that anomaly of a game where he had his 8 shutty. So if we look at the recent outing, the first outing against Jake Irvin, which was a year ago, the Mets have definitely had his upper hand on. Maybe they're hoping that Eddie Alvarez can kind of just tack on with the lineup doing damage big time early. All I know is that Luis Angel Acuna should be in this ball game at some point, especially if Eddie Alvarez is not really hitting all that well early on in this one. I just don't understand it, because here's the thing. Eddie's nice, but he's not a guy that can even be on the playoff roster the way that someone in Luis Angel Acuna can be. And speaking of Acuna, what do Acuna and Eddie Alvarez both have? It's elite speed. And Acuna has it. Younger, likely healthier, all these factors come into play, and is a guy that we actually see ourselves having a future with. All the more reason that you should be playing this guy as much as humanly possible. Harrison Bader, a guy that I actually tend to agree. You could definitely argue he should be playing as well. I'm not going to make as much of a gripe with that, however. I don't mind Tyrone Taylor playing. I think Tyrone deserves the opportunity after the home run yesterday. I also understand if you say, but Wardy, we saw Bader hit a home run 2 games ago. Why isn't he playing? So, again, I understand. I'm not trying to, pick favorites here, but how the configuration is, you need Jesse Winker's bat in that lineup 100%, and you absolutely need to make sure that WardyNYM can snap out of this funk. Now you have him right in the heart of your order. Again, you're batting fifth. I mean, that could be death sentence for this Mets team. If the Mets do not hit today, you're going to look at the core. You're going to look right there, 3, 4, and 5. 3, 4, 5, 6. That is it. JD, Pete, Brandon, Mark. This Mets team, if they win, you're going to look at that core being a huge factor as to why. Jose Iglesias is going to do Jose Iglesias things. He's going to get on base at least twice tonight. Jesse Winker is going to get on base at least twice tonight. I'm very confident in saying that. I actually love the top of the order for the Mets in this one. But as we get, again, to the heart of this thing, that is where it's all going to come down to. Can these guys step up now without Mr. Francisco Lindor? And while I have optimism, the skepticism comes in with everything that I just relayed your way, folks. So that's what we have there on the laps between the two. Let me know how you guys feel. Give me a simple yay or a nay and the live show to all my live viewers right now. I greatly appreciate that. And if you're watching this also on replay, let me know in the comments down below, not only your thoughts on the laps, but just your overall thoughts here on the Mets in this 3-game set against the Washington Nationals, as Sean Manaea is going to have himself a big matchup here against Irvin. Because even though Irvin has gotten rocked by the Mets as of late, we need Sean Manaea to continue to pitch the way that he has been. Sean Manaea has been so brilliant for the Mets. Another great outing the last time that he was out there. He just continues to get the job done. I believe his last time he did have the walks a little bit up. I think he walked 4 or so, but that's okay. I've been very encouraged with Sean Manaea for the vast majority of the season. And now to see him match up against, while they are young and vibrant, are still a lesser lap, a lesser Washington Nationals team. I want to see Sean Manaea absolutely shoved tonight. I'm going to give a prediction right now, everybody. Sean Manaea's final line is going to be as follows. 7.1 innings pitched. He's going to give up a total of 5 hits. He's going to give up a total of tops 2 earned runs. Might be a 1 run and a 1 unearned run situation. And he's going to walk 2, and he's going to strike out 8. That is my line that I'm going to go with Sean Manaea tonight. Right, I'm actually going to write it down just so I remember. 7.1 innings. Say it with me, everybody. And let me know your predictions down below. 7.1 innings of 5 hit, tops 2 earned run baseball, 2 walks, 8 Ks. And if Sean does a line very similar, if not to a T like that, that is a very strong, that's going to be a 7 out of 10 outing that I would give him every day of the week. So that's what I'm going. Why Lindor? Why Lindor what? Why isn't he playing? It's because of the back ailment that we spoke about at great length earlier throughout this pregame coverage. Let's see here. If you're saying why Lindor in general, just because of the injury, it's because, sadly, this is the reality of being a Mets fan and being a sports fan. Every time you feel like you finally have something going right, where it's all making sense, everything is clicking, there has to be something to derail it. Because as an old man once said, as many people have said over time and time again, as amazing as something is, nothing lasts forever. All good things come to an end. And the case of the Mets stretches, they've had great ones. Will they be able to start a new one now without Francisco Lindor at the helm of it for at least 2, 3, 4 plus games? This is do or die season, folks. This is do or die season. CJ Abrams isn't playing. Yes, that is something to make note of, and that's huge that CJ Abrams isn't starting. CJ is lethal. We all know that. I get annoyed with the whole righty splits and not letting someone to play because of that. These guys need to learn. No, I agree. I 100% agree. And it's a tough balance. I will say that in regards to Carlos Mendoza. It's easier said than done, if that makes sense. We're like trying to balance the information while also having the gut feel. And we've seen a lot of trials and tribulations with Carlos Mendoza as a first-year manager already this year. And I think a lot that we have seen as of late has just been, over managing the bullpen, overthinking it, need to simplify things, and then maybe simplifying it too much when you know that this is clearly a better route. And say just giving the opportunity to Luis Angel Acuna, because Acuna, I know he didn't do well yesterday, and I know it directly goes in hand to a degree because of the pitching that he was facing. I can't even say right-handed, however, because Christopher Sanchez was cruising through 7, right? Acuna, the most of his at-bats they had yesterday was against a lefty. So it's not even one of those things where you can say, Acuna just struggled yesterday as coming in late for Lindor after Lindor played the first inning because he was facing righty. It wasn't the case. It was just because Christopher Sanchez is very good and he carved up the entire Mets lineup. They have nothing to show on a Sunday. That sounds like a day that ends in Y. It is a day that ends in Y. Same is the case for the Mets and their incompetent ability to hit when they need to. Let's see. How can batters learn to hit on a weaker side if they aren't given the chance to work on a weakness? No, I know. It's a fair question. It's an absolutely fair question. And the response to that is, unfortunately, it's one of those things where every team kind of evaluates the player projection and production differently. In the case of Luis Angel Acuna, the Mets want to give him playing time. They were adamant about saying that, we're not going to call him up until we really can. I understand the Lindor injury factors into things here, but all the more reason why you should be playing him. So we'll see. I bet we see Acuna in this ballgame at some point. If we don't, the good thing is that means Eddie Alvarez gave us a reason as to why Acuna didn't need to come in the ballgame. Maybe Eddie Alvarez has a 2-hit day for all we know. And there's one thing I can say, outside of being heavily against the last time Eddie Alvarez started in a lineup for the Mets, I hated that lineup then. I didn't think it was good, and it was terrible. The Mets couldn't hit shit against the Blue Jays, and if it wasn't for, I believe, Francisco Lindor's 9th-inning home run to snap the hitless skid, or maybe it was, maybe I'm flip-flopping them with one other game of that series against Toronto. Either way, when the Mets started DJ Stewart, yes, this is how we know it was a different game, because DJ Stewart did have a 2-out hit that wasn't a good, just poked on one oppo. DJ and Eddie Alvarez, when they started in that game against the Blue Jays, coincidentally enough, the Mets lost that game because they just did not look good. And I know it had a lot to do with Alonso not hitting and the key guys in the heart of your lineup, but it doesn't help when the other key aspects of your lineup that are supposed to be productive, whether it's the top of the order or whether it's the bottom there, and 7, 8, 9, when you have guys that really shouldn't be playing, you're going to find yourself having an issue. Jacob Young is a defensive stud. Yep, he's a contact-hitting stud when he's right, and he's very strong defensively. He's had a great range. We've seen that already against the Mets earlier this year, so it's going to be interesting to see how this matchup goes. Let's go, Wardy. Give us encouragement for this first series versus the Nats. My encouragement to each and every one of you is the season is not done. For all you schmucks out there that went out of your way this year to tell me that, oh, we're cooked without Lindor, that this is that. Don't get me wrong. I firmly believe we are cooked if we lose Francisco Lindor, even just a whole series. I'm really not feeling good about it if I'm being blunt with you. But I will tell you that the Mets have overcome so much this season to begin with. And if there is one team that has the ability to overcome now their latest obstacle, it is this club. I firmly believe that they have all the on-paper talent to make it happen. It's just about putting it together, having the right vibes. And you know what? Basically retiring Grimace's number, but instead of a number, retiring a seat and painting it purple that they did at Citi Field today. And that is going to be what's going to help get them going. Then sure as shit, that is fine by me. So that is what I'm going to leave you with, everybody. The New York Mets, they control their destiny. 2 weeks of what is going to be straight playoff baseball with or without Francisco Lindor. Obviously, the confidence level is far greater with Lindor than not. And yes, the lack of optimism increases the longer that Lindor isn't playing. But in the interim, the Mets need to take care of business tonight against the Washington Nationals club that is oh so vulnerable and is oh so ready to give up a series victory to the New York Mets. So everybody, thank you all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate that. Terrence needs to stay in the batting cage. Terrence isn't perfect, but he's definitely much better than a lot of other backup catchers we've had in years past. You know that. You think Beatty still has a future with the Mets? I do. It's going to be a very interesting offseason for him, how the Mets plan to evaluate him, because the Mets didn't trade him at the deadline because they didn't want to undervalue him, and they firmly believe they still has a shot in the organization. We'll see what happens regarding Beatty when we get to the offseason. Until then, though, have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. Demon D is more worried about the Mets than he is his Yankees. I'd say the same thing, considering the Yankees have had a lot of turmoil this year. Oh, my goodness. I love it. Keep talking, brother. Appreciate the viewership. Always will. Thank you guys as always. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. See you all for our post-game coverage directly after tonight's game. We have a lot to break down, a lot of key updates, and hopefully